Hello and welcome to a new part in my series where I contribute to real-world open source projects and show you how I change, improve, fix bugs in real-world production code. And in this part, I will attempt to fix a very nasty bug in Parse SDK for Android. Now, just in case you haven't had a chance to work with Parse, or maybe you even haven't heard about it before, let's quickly go over what is really Parse. So according to their website, Parse is a complete application stack. Build applications faster with object and file storage, user authentication, push notifications, dashboard, and more out of the box. So Parse used to be started as a serverless database. For example, if you've used Firefox Firestore or Firefox Firebase real-time database, Parse used to be a very similar offering. In fact, Parse was the first offering of this type. It gave kind of it was a revolution in serverless computing. But then Facebook acquired Parse and then they shut it down. However, when they shut it down, they released the source code of Parse Server, this project Parse Server, as an open source, and the community picked up from there. And today, Parse Server is a very mature, very powerful tool. Now, it's not serverless anymore. You should actually, have your server and install Parse Server and Parse dashboard on your own server, or you can use some, offering. Some third-party providers give you kind of serverless wrapper around Parse. And as you might guess, since you have Parse Server and Parse dashboard, you should also have SDKs. You should also integrate Parse-related code in your client-side applications. And one of these SDKs, there are many of them, as you can see, one of them is Android SDK, view on GitHub. Now, as you might imagine, Android SDK for something like Parse would be a very complex project. And indeed, Parse provides you with cloud storage, right? It provides you with push notifications, with files, with local data store, basically kind of a NoSQL wrapper, non-relational wrapper around local SQLite database. It's a very complex project. And in this video, what I want to do is to fix one very nasty bug in this SDK. Here's the bug. Crash when fetching Parse file for the second time. And as you might notice, I reported this bug myself. That's my kind of personal account, Vizukanov. So let's understand what's the problem here. I have Parse object that stores a file, large file. When I attempt to get the file in Android, everything works as expected. This is the approximate flow, executed on a background thread. So this code I executed on a background thread and it works. However, in some situations, the same flow can be triggered for the second time from different entry point before Parse Android SDK managed to download the contents of the file from the server. In that case, the following runtime exception is thrown. So basically, if I take this line of code, parse file, get file, and execute it from two concurrent threads through two separate running threads at the same time, I will get an exception. Basically, I cannot download this parse file from two threads simultaneously. And that's a problem because, well, you don't want to be limited by that. You want to be able to concurrently get this file from multiple threads. And the SDK should resolve all the required flows internally. And, well, obviously it shouldn't throw an exception. Okay, it looks like Android SDK doesn't handle this scenario of concurrent fetching of the same file from multiple threads. I see this issue from 2016, which reported basically the same problem. So this issue existed in Parse SDK for many years, and I think it now is a good time to fix it, or at least to attempt to fix it. Now let's just scroll down to this exception, and here's the exception: caused by file not found exception, source, and then some long, very long path does not exist. And here we have the stack, and basically it comes from parse file controller file and then parse file utils file. All right, so that's the problem, and I will attach a link to this issue in the description of this video so you can find it. But here down you can see a little bit of a discussion with one of the maintainers of Parse, and here I told them that we did not resolve this problem, but we worked around this problem by implementing kind of manager global tracker of files download, and we wanted to prevent the same parse file from being downloaded multiple times. This worked all right for us, even though it's cumbersome and of course it's kind of a hack. But now I would like to fix this problem in order for us and other users of Parse to enjoy proper flow. Okay, where we start here. Parse file controller, fetch async method, line 225. All right, now we jump into the source code, and as you can see, Parse SDK for Android is comprised of multiple modules. We are interested to find the following: parse file controller file. So parse file controller class, and here this fetch async method, which I remind you was where the exception was thrown from. Line 225, that's here, okay? And we see this call to move file, temp file, cache file, and this move file throws an exception because basically one of these arguments does not exist. Now, let's start by looking at the general structure of the code. As you can see, there are like many nested indentations level, which kind of unfortunate in my estimation. And here fetch async returns task, generic task class, which wraps a file. Now here you can see some task call, and then cache file exists, executors, IO, and then continuation with task. Basically this task is somehow similar to a future object. That's just a special type of object that allows you to work with concurrent code. And to be honest, I'm not sure how this code works. I've never worked with these parse tasks, so I don't really understand what's going on here. However, at this point, it's not important that I don't understand what's going on here, because Parse SDK for Android contains unit tests. So if we go and try to find the unit test file for this parse file controller, we'll find this parse file controller test, and indeed this file contains tests, and I can run these tests, and hopefully they will even execute. Yep, something happens. Okay, great. And here we can see that 15 tests passed. So very good job by Parse. At the very least, they have some unit tests for this class. And therefore, I don't really care that I don't understand what's going on here. And the reason why I don't care that I don't understand how this class works right now is because I'm confident that if I manage to write a unit test that reproduces this problem, I will be able to fix the problem later. And therefore, the question now becomes, can I write a unit test to reproduce that problem? So I think we are going to separate this fix into two different videos. In this video, I will attempt to write this unit test. This will be a concurrent unit test, so it will be kind of more difficult, more challenging than, just simple unit tests that you might have seen so far, or maybe you haven't seen any. And in the next video, assuming I will be able to write a unit test to reproduce this issue, in the next video, I will fix this issue to make that unit test green. So our goal in this video is to reproduce that issue. And to reproduce that issue, I need to just add additional unit tests here. Now, what I want to see here is the list of all unit tests and see if there's anything similar to what I've had. Now, let's go back for a moment to debug. So just to remind you, that's the stack trace, file not found exception, and inside move file, but that's not really the reason for the problem, because that's just a util that moves files around. The problem is somewhere here, fetch async, and one of the files passed into this move file utility is basically non-existent. So here's the problem, and therefore the unit test that I need to write should exercise this fetch async method concurrently from two different threads and make sure that a similar exception to what we see here is thrown. Once I've got that, once I've got this failing unit test, I'm sure I will be able to fix this problem. So let's go and write this unit test. Once again, two concurrent calls to this fetch async for the same file, and we need to make sure that an exception is thrown. So that's why I'm looking at this list of existing unit tests in an attempt to find some unit test which is already similar to what I need, because I don't want to write unit tests from scratch and it will take me a lot of time. Well, luckily we see all these unit tests. Test fetch async already cancelled, right? So fetch async is exactly that method that I want to test myself. So I just need to find a unit test which is similar to what I need. Test fetch async cache, test fetch async success. Well, and then test fetch async failure and nothing else. I think this test fetch async success is the closest to what I need. So test fetch async concurrent calls success, and here they set up some data and set up some mock HTTP response. They have Parse HTTP response, their own wrapper around the networking library, whatever they use. And then they create mock HTTP client. And then when any execute method with any argument is called on this mock HTTP client, they return their mock HTTP response. And then they basically create a new file. Sorry, they make sure that it does not exist. So they want to make sure that this cache file does not exist. And then they instantiate the controller, which is the system under test, and they pass in their file client, basically this fake HTTP client that they set up right here. And then they create this parse file state, file name, some mock name, mock URL, and then they execute this fetch async method and then assert all kinds of stuff. What I want to do is to execute this fetch async method twice and also assert all kinds of stuff on the results of both of these executions, but it won't be as simple as just, adding task 2 and that's it. That's a serial execution. That's not what I want. Sorry, that's just this line just creates tasks, and it's here that the task is being executed. So even if I do it like that, result to wait task 2, that's not good enough because that's a serial execution and I want to have that concurrent. And therefore this unit test is going to be more complicated, and that's why I want in this video to concentrate just on writing the correct unit test and making sure that I reproduce the problem. So let's see if I can do that. What I want to do is to have 2 threads. So new thread, that will be thread 1, and I will start it right away, right? And inside this thread, I want to execute this call. However, the result of this call will be needed outside of this thread, and therefore I need to somehow pass it to the external, well, basically to here. I want to use the result of this call from this new thread inside the thread that runs this entire test method. And to do that, I need to create a new storage for this file, right? Task, file, task. And what I want to do, sorry, I want to copy this one here as well, because once again, I want to execute. This just sets up the task and this wait executes the task. And therefore, I want to execute this wait method here inside my new thread. And the result of this execution, I want to pass outside. And therefore, I will create the following. I will create an atomic reference of type file, call it file1 reference. What's going on? New atomic reference, right? And I will do the same for file2. Whatever I do for file1, I will do for file2 as well. So here I will create this task, and then instead of doing that, I will do the following. I will do file1 reference set to the result of this execution. Now you might say, wait a second, you set up your file reference here and then you use it inside another thread. So aren't these a violation of some multi-threading rule? Is it guaranteed that file1 reference or the controller itself will be even visible within this thread? And the answer is yes, it is guaranteed because I start this thread from this thread and there happens before guarantee on this start method. That's the synchronization barrier. Now, if this doesn't tell you anything, don't worry, you don't really need to understand that. We just want to write this unit test. So, okay, I have this wait, and what's the problem here? Okay, we have an exception. So let's just surround it with an exception. So do it like this. Maybe just, let's do it like even this, right? Parse exception, and when exception is thrown, we just want to throw our own runtime exception to make the test fail. Okay, so that will be 1, and then, before we do that, if I just start this thread concurrently, then the test thread, the thread that executes this test method, will keep on running and complete the test, maybe before this call has a chance to complete. So if I do the following, if I do, let's say, file result one equals file one reference get, right? It's not guaranteed that by the time the test thread calls this get method, this new thread set anything inside this file one reference, so the result can be null, and therefore we want to wait for the completion of this flow inside this test thread. And the way to resolve this, well, there are multiple ways, but I will just use a countdown latch. So equals new countdown latch, and it will have the initial count of 2. Why 2? Well, because I have 2 files and I will have 2 threads. So here, whatever happens, I want to decrement countdown. I want to decrement this countdown latch. And once the countdown latch will reach the countdown of 0, here I will do countdown latch await. So this await will block the test thread until countdown latch reaches the count of 0. So here countdown latch will be reduced to 1, and another thread. Okay, so I'll create another thread here, start another thread, because once again, what I want to test here is execution from 2 concurrent threads, and therefore I actually need these 2 concurrent threads. And just here I want to replace all references to 1, 2, 2, right? So file to reference, and I basically fetch async the same exact state, store it inside file to reference, and countdown. So by the time this method unblocks and we continue here, this file one reference will be valid, and file 2 reference will be valid too. And now I don't need that anymore. So, okay, let's say, unless I made some mistake, my test case is ready. Now let's work on our assertions. First of all, basically this assertion verifies that we hit the network just once. And it was correct in the previous test case that I copied, but it is also correct right now, because even though I do fetch this file from 2 different threads, I want to ensure that it was downloaded just once. I want to ensure that internally the SDK understands that it's the same file, and if it's already being downloaded, there is no reason to start a new download for it, and therefore this assertion remains the same. So assert true result 1 exists, assert hello, okay, that's basically the contents of result 1. We want to assert that result 1 is the correct file, and we want to do the same for result 2, of course, right? We want to make sure that both of these files downloaded successfully. And then this assertion basically says that this controller should clean up the temp file after the download is complete. So that's the unit test. I'm not sure it will work, but we will try it and see how it goes, right? Okay, let's see what's happening here. Our test started and then it failed. Let's see how it failed. Okay, execute internal, wanted 1 time, right? But was 3 times. 3 times it was executed. So that's a problem. So here, this assertion, I wrote that this should be executed just once, but it is being executed more than once. Basically, we hit the network more than once. So something inside this controller does not account for the possibility of being fetched from 2 different threads. And just to make sure, okay, I will remove this assertion, because what I want to reproduce is not exactly that. Actually, I want to comment on something about this unit test. The unit test, the existing unit tests inside this repository, they are not very well written because there are multiple assertions inside one single test. So for example, inside this test, they assert that there are no multiple network requests, and then they assert something about the result of the execution, and then they also assert that the stem file is being cleaned. And that should actually be 3 different tests. So this test should have been separated into 3. And this also kind of bites me here, because I don't want to fall on this assertion. I want to actually make sure that I reproduce that exception which crashed our application. Okay, let's see what's going on here. Expected, but was nothing, So I do get some errors, but I cannot reproduce that exception, and I'm not really sure why. Okay, so here we can see that file one result was expected to be that, but was actually empty. Why was it empty? I wouldn't expect this test to result in an empty file because I copied it from an existing test which actually should have passed. And that's really strange. So you know what? Let's do it like that. Let's remove this second thread for now, and then let's see if we can get past this assertion as well. Because if I remove this thread, this test basically becomes serial test for just one fetch. Okay, but it will not complete, of course. Sorry, that's my bad. I have this countdown latch here, and therefore the test thread will not complete past this point unless I do this countdown here. So instead, I will just remove that, but of course that parse exception is thrown. Let's just do it like this. Copy this line, comment out everything inside this thread except for countdown latch countdown. Lambda can be replaced. Okay, no problem with that. And once I do that, result 2 should be null, and we should fail. We shouldn't fail. Okay, I will do it like this. Let's rerun the test and make sure that we can get the contents of this file all right. Okay, so now it works, and therefore indeed the fact that we cannot get the contents of this file are related to this concurrent execution from two different threads. So that's maybe not the same problem that I wanted to reproduce here, but that's indeed a very similar problem. So let's just put this assertion here at the bottom, because really it's not that important. It should have been a standalone test, but I don't want to change, the layout of these tests because they already exist. So I try to follow the same coding convention. But here I have a problem. Once I fetch this file concurrently from two different threads, something screws up inside the implementation of this controller, parse file controller, and I don't get the data back. I don't get the exception that I wanted to get, but I also don't get the data back. And therefore, first of all, I need to fix this problem, and maybe then we will see the exception. So overall, as far as I'm concerned, this unit test does reproduce the problem. It's not the same problem, but this unit test shows me that when I try to fetch the same file from two concurrent threads, then I have some problem inside the implementation of this parse file controller. And I want to fix this problem to make sure that indeed it supports concurrent fetching of the same file from multiple threads. And that's exactly what I'm going to do in the next video. Currently, I have a failing unit test that reproduces some problem related to concurrency. And in the next video, I will try to fix the problem and make sure that that unit test is green, that it passes. And if it will throw this exception which we saw, which I reported in parse issue tracker, then I will resolve that problem after I fix the immediate problem of not getting any data back at all. So that will be the contents of the next video. And so far, I hope that you just enjoyed this kind of a tutorial on writing concurrent unit tests. See you in the next video then.